Welcome back to our devotion on God's wisdom in the book of Proverbs. As James says, if we lack wisdom, we should ask God because he gives wisdom generously. But the question always comes down to what are we going to do with the wisdom that he imparts to us? Hi, I'm Tracy with KOGmissions.com and welcome to Simple Bible Truth. I hope to encourage you in your faith and to inspire you to seek truth, to love God, and to obey Jesus. Proverbs 7 starts by giving us some really good advice for young people and people of all ages. It starts by saying, "My child, devote yourself to my words." So what does it look like to devote ourselves to God's words? It means to be committed to them, committed to reading and studying them and obeying them as well. We choose to believe and obey instead of just doing what we want or what we think is right. And then it says, store up my commands inside yourself. So don't just let God's words come in one ear and go out the other. Really hear what he is saying and then hold on to what you've learned and live according to his wisdom. Committing his commands and his words to memory is a very good thing to do as well. Keep my commands so that you may live, and obey my instruction as your most prized possession. Hearing God's words and understanding what he has commanded is a life and death thing for us. Keeping his commands means obeying his commands. And once we know what God desires of us and the commands that he has for his children, we should obey. And these things, the knowledge of his commands and his desires, should be our most prized possession. And how do we care for our most prized possessions? We protect them. How do we treat them? We put them where we can see them and enjoy them. He then goes on to say, bind them on your forearm, write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding a close relative. The Jews took this a little far, and they bound things to their arms and their foreheads as a reminder. But I think we can take this to mean that it applies to God's words and what we do with them, and what we do with our hands and how we live. I don't think he is telling us to get a tattoo on our heart, but to put them in our hearts and in our minds so that they can speak to us when we need them to. And the rest of this chapter then goes on to tell us how they can speak to us when we are tempted and help us to keep us from sinning. He tells his son that if he does this, it will keep him from the adulterous woman. We see that temptation can come when someone flatters us. So we do need to beware of flattery. The example that is given to us can be applied to many different temptations in life, not just adultery. The story also tells us that if we are naive and lack sense, which means we lack God's wisdom, this is the beginning of our downfall. Temptation can happen when we are just out about our daily lives, just walking down the street. And then suddenly we are hit by a temptation. Temptation often comes out to meet us, even when we are not looking for it. With the example here, a wise person would see right away this temptation and know it should be avoided and go by on the other side of the street, or even better yet, just run from it. Here, the woman is dressed like a prostitute. So if temptation is not covered up and hidden, we should train ourselves to notice it and then turn our eyes and our hearts away from it. Don't think about it or meditate on it. Don't rationalize how you won't get burned by the fire. We see even in this example that the young man has a choice. When he is invited in, he still has a choice to pass by and not stop and talk to her or look at her. If you stop and consider the temptation, you are now one step closer to sin and being persuaded by those tempting thoughts. And then suddenly you are going to go off the narrow path and you'll be chasing temptation down the wide road. The passage paints a vivid image of what is happening. You are like an ox that goes to the slaughter, like a stag prancing into a trapper's snare till an arrow pierces his liver, like a bird hurrying into a trap, and he does not know that it will cost him his life. So now that the father passed on his wisdom, he then reminds his sons to listen to him and pay attention to the words that he speaks. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not wander into her pathways, for she has brought down many fatally wounded, and all those she has slain are many. Her house is the way to the grave, going down to the chambers of death. So simple. Temptation turns us aside to sin. And when we wander on its pathways, rather than staying on God's path, the path that Jesus showed us, it leads to death. The end result is that you will be fatally wounded. Sin will slay you. It will take you to the grave, right down to the chamber of death. So be wise and pay attention to God's words. Keep your heart and your mind focused on what He says, and then do it. Obey. Obedience will keep you off the path of sin and on the path that leads to life in the coming age when Jesus returns. Next time, we'll take a look at wisdom from Proverbs chapter 8. Please like and subscribe. Click the bell so that you won't miss this next devotion, and I hope to see you again soon. Until then, keep seeking truth, loving God, and obeying Jesus.